A legislative audit published this week found Idaho State University failed to properly use the money it was allocated several years ago. Nearly $1 million in public funds were approved for a forensic pathology center at ISU in 2022, a project they were trying to complete with Bannock County. Well, that project never happened, yet there was still a payment made by Idaho State to Bannock County. Of course, that lack of return on investment got the attention of lawmakers, which raised questions of oversight and misuse of money. Joe Parris spoke with Idaho State about the audit and the actions the university has taken already to take responsibility.
A 2022 green light from the Idaho legislature cleared the way for a major partnership. In November 2022, a press release announcing that Idaho State University and Bannock County have signed an agreement to fund and build the East Idaho Forensic Pathology Center on the Pocatello campus. A dual-function partnership. It would be a much-needed facility for autopsies serving 17 counties, as well as a training and research opportunity for Idaho State students. The original announcement outlined $900,000 in state funding, combined with $2 million in ARPA federal grant money to pay for the project. A note, though, in the 2022 legislative funding bill, House Bill 776, any unspent funds at the end of the appropriation period were to be returned to the state of Idaho General Fund, and that end of that period, June 30th, 2023. To ensure that, an Idaho State staffer wrote, "We think the cleanest path forward is for the county to invoice us for $900,000, the logic appearing to be that the money would be protected from being returned as research and development on the project continued." The audit makes it clear that Idaho State University received an invoice from Bannock County on April 17, 2023 for $853,700, the remaining balance of the initial $900,000 allocation. So that's the money minus funds that had already been spent on the project. And it was actually paid on April 20th. And that invoice simply listed the payment as Forensic Pathology Project, with really no supporting documentation of actual expenses that were incurred, something that is required under the funding legislation. In August 2023, emails cited in the audit show that Idaho State staffers were notified that Bannock County had decided they were not moving forward with the project, instead deciding to build a facility on county-owned land rather than the university campus. Some Idaho State staff raised concerns about the money and if it needed to be returned to Idaho State from the county. In November of 2024, the Idaho Freedom Foundation published a piece questioning the financial transaction. That same day, Senator Glenida Zuderfeld published a call to action on her Substack. And the legislative audit found, quote, "no evidence that Idaho State attempted to obtain additional documentation to support the expenditure or to get their money back until the media and the legislature began asking questions." Idaho State did ultimately get the money back from Bannock County, two separate checks. The first for about $685,000 on December 19th, 2024, a second check for about $168,000 on January 9th, 2025. And both of those checks sent back to the Idaho State Treasurer.
Going on.
Weeks later, new Idaho State University President Dr. Robert Wagner acknowledged to lawmakers on the budgeting committee the actions that had happened under his predecessor.
One of the areas that I have identified that Idaho State University must do better at is, number one, recognize that legislative intent is law.
Dr. Wagner explained that this got on his radar in the fall of 2024, and he immediately moved to take action.
It's incredibly important for us as an institution when those funds come to us that we take full and complete responsibility and realize and understand what that intent is. We also need to track those funds. We need to follow and make sure that the funds are being used appropriately.
We've been open and transparent and working with the auditors, and so we expected the audit to be released.
Ryan Sargent is Associate Vice President of Government and Community Relations at Idaho State.
The money was returned to the state as quickly as possible. And that's not to mitigate any of the issues or the responsibility that we have to follow legislative intent, which is the law. But as soon as President Wagner became aware of it, this was pretty quickly solved as best as the university could.
The university is fully acknowledging the fairly criticized actions.
Were some mistakes made in not following legislative intent and having the pathology lab built on Idaho State's campus? Yes, and we readily admit to to those mistakes, but the self-correction and the fact that all of the money was returned to the state, I think speaks volumes to how seriously Idaho State took this issue.
As President Wagner told lawmakers back in January, new practices are already in place at Idaho State to prevent something like this happening again in the future.
We have created internal processes that include our CFO, as well as our legal counsel and government relations, to really monitor every single dollar that's allocated to Idaho State and make sure that it's spent in the way that taxpayers expect, and to provide the services that the legislature wants through their investments.
And our coverage will continue on our News at 6 with our Morgan Romero. Brian, she's talking about next steps with possibly the AG's office, also checking in with the co-chair of Idaho's Budgeting Committee, Representative Wendy Horman, talking about if lawmakers, what their thoughts are on this whole thing.
That's my question would be, okay, so the money is returned. What are the repercussions?
I think even if the money is returned, I mean, there still is a possibility that there was wrongdoing. There was a very narrow scope in this audit, basically just to get a very basic understanding of what happened and what went wrong. And there was 2 recommendations to Idaho State and what to do, and they've already addressed that, as you heard. But there still could be some type of another element with the AG's office.
Okay.
Morgan's working on finding out more from them.
All right. Thanks, Joe.